Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. So everyone, this is Chris Wark. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a dad of two beautiful little girls. He's a health coach. He used to be in a band, I read recently. And Chris was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2003 at the age of 26. He had surgery, but instead of taking the chemotherapy that was prescribed, he used instead nutrition and natural therapies to heal himself. Since his recovery, he's dedicated himself to inspiring countless people around the world to take control of their health and reverse disease with a radical transformation of diet and lifestyle and mindset, I would add. In addition to sharing his message in books, the latest of which came out just a couple weeks ago, and I hope you'll tell us more about that, Chris. Chris shares his wisdom in a down-to-earth, firm, but loving style at smoothie bars, health and wellness events, hospitals, churches, culinary schools, Whole Foods, and more. He's also made appearances on radio and television, including the Ricki Lake Show and the Lisa Oz Show, and he was featured as a featured speaker in The Truth About Cancer, which is an amazing docuseries that I usually recommend every year, and in the award-winning documentary film, The C Word. And in case you haven't noticed, Chris is also sharing his thoughts and wisdom about health and healing today on my Facebook page. Thanks again so much for being here. I'm honored and grateful for you, Chris Wark. And take it away. I want to hear your story. And for my people who don't know you, I'd love for you to tell it, starting kind of from the beginning.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 years old. It was a big shock, obviously. Anyone getting cancer at any age, it's never good news. But I had a very sort of unique journey that took me down roads I didn't expect to go down, and cancer ended up being an incredible gift and a blessing in my life. The disease itself is not a blessing, but what the amazing transformation that can happen in your life as a result of going through a life-threatening disease like cancer, or really any adversity, can, often change you if you let it, and it should change you, but it can change you for the better or for the worse. And it's really your choice as to how adversity changes you. And so I learned a lot of very valuable lessons through the journey. And that's what I talk about in my first book, Chris Beat Cancer, and then sort of continue that in the new book, which is Beat Cancer Daily, which is a sort of a daily reader or daily devotional to keep somebody on the healthy path. Because we all need daily encouragement and inspiration and practical advice. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get off track. It's easy to get discouraged and depressed and feel hopeless. And sometimes you just need a little nudge, just a little extra nudge, a little spark to step out in faith, to take even just a small step in the right direction, or a big step, right? Either one. And once you do, then you start to immediately feel better, right? I mean, there are chemicals released in your body that actually reward you for taking action to change your life or getting things done. So anyway, I was diagnosed at 26, and I was a very typical patient in the sense that I had no clue about the disease of cancer. I had never had any close friends or family go through it. And I had no frame of reference. It was just completely new, right? A very new thing. You have cancer. And I'm like, cancer? This is only things that, this is like the disease that people get in a movie or a TV show when they want it to be really dramatic.
Right. And you were so young, which makes it so unlikely to begin with, right? I
For
mean, that's
sure.
ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, young adult colon cancer should be noted that it is one of the fastest growing segments of cancer. More young adults are getting colon cancer than ever before. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force has just lowered the recommended age for colonoscopies for colon cancer screening from 50 to 45, which is frankly still, in my opinion, too low. I mean, heck, we could start doing it in screening people in their 30s and we'd probably catch a lot of polyps. So anyway, I was told after a colonoscopy, which was done after months of abdominal pain that would just come and go. You know, it wasn't debilitating, but it was enough to be bothersome. And after realizing like this isn't getting better, I guess I should go to the doctor and was referred around, eventually ended up at the gastroenterologist. And I mean, I didn't even know what a colon was. I thought it was a punctuation mark. You know what I mean? Someone had said, what's a colon? I'm like, I don't know what body part that is exactly. Like, I know it's part of your digestive tract. Which part is it? Well, anyway, for anybody that doesn't know, it's the large intestine. So they found a golf ball sized tumor. They biopsied it. They told me it was cancerous. The doctor said, we got to get you into surgery right away and get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. And I was like, okay. But they wanted to have me into surgery right away. I mean, within just a couple days, you know, I mean, and that's how fast this train moves. Once you get a cancer diagnosis, I mean, you are on the train and it has left the station and it's like you just become a passenger. You lose sort of control of your life and health decisions. You know, they make you feel like you're making decisions, but you're really not. You're just being told what to do. Mm-hmm. And if you say no, then there's a tremendous amount of pressure to say yes.
Right. Well, and face it, like a lot of people really want to be told what to do, right? Like number one, they've never heard of what a colon is. And now they're hearing they've got this thing that could kill them that's in their colon. And they're just like, take me and do what you will, right? Like a lot of people are a little bit deer in the headlights about it, I think. I
absolutely was. And you're right. You're right. I mean, it's like, look, you're the expert doctor and I don't know anything. And so I'm going to trust you to fix me. And so I was able to, this was, you know, the bad news hit like a couple days before Christmas. So it was already just like, man, like this is terrible. Like this is really, really the worst Christmas ever. And so I was able to postpone the surgery about 10 days. And I went in on December 30th. They took out a third of my large intestine. They took out the tumor. When I woke up, they said, it's worse than we thought. We thought you were probably stage 2. You're stage 3C, which means the tumor had infiltrated through the wall of my colon and cancer cells had spread to surrounding lymph nodes. And so the next step for you is going to be 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. So at that point, you know, it was just more bad news, because before that revelation about my condition, I was under the impression that I would have the surgery and I would recover and go home and just get on with my life. Chemo was not a part of the conversation until they realized it was stage 3. So initially I accepted that, like, okay, you know, this is my life now. But then a series of events kind of transpired and got me thinking differently. And for the first thing that happened was the first meal that they served me in the hospital, which was a sloppy Joe. They had cut out a third of my guts, third of my large intestine, sewed it back together, and then brought me a sloppy Joe.
It's like, really? Really? That's my
it's like more punishment. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
ridiculous.
You know, the sloppy Joe is not a menu item on restaurant menus because nobody likes them.
Right. It's like your last ditch effort to clean up your fridge and get everything out of there onto a piece of bread.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, up until that point, I just thought like sloppy joes, like if someone said, where can you get a sloppy joe? I would have said summer camp, the military,
The oncology ward.
definitely in prison. They're definitely serving them in prison.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, surprisingly, right. Hospitals, cancer patients, here you go. Enjoy the sloppy joe. So that was strange. I mean, I had a background in health in the sense that I worked for Wild Oats, which got bought out by Whole Foods. So I knew what health food was. I knew about that world. My mom had always been kind of a health foodie and shopped at the little hole in the wall health food stores, but she didn't raise me vegetarian or vegan or anything like that. But she was always taking lots of supplements and buying stuff like wheat germ and sprouts and kefir and, whole grain bread and the peanut butter you have to stir, stuff like that. She was not at the level of today's crunchy moms. Okay. But she was
a precursor. She was like,
she was the first wave, of health, sort of health conscious people. And she was a voracious reader and had read tons and tons of books that she bought at the health food store. So I definitely knew what healthy living kind of was about, but I wasn't doing it. I was actually a junk food connoisseur because I've always been thin. So I just had a free pass. I thought I can eat whatever I want. Doesn't matter. And I mean, I actually, because I've always been thin, I would overeat, right? There was a period of time in my life in college. I mean, I was drinking massive weight gainer shakes and working out and trying to gain weight, right? Trying to get bigger,
right?
Which a lot of guys do, and with no regard whatsoever to what I was putting in my body. It was just like calories, milk, ice cream,
Which just amplifies the amount of crap you can put in your mouth because the only outcome you're looking at is whether your weight's changing, but you're not looking at the cumulative toxic load that you're taking on from all that.
No way. I was not.
Yeah.
And so I was taking all the bodybuilding supplements and all this crap. Not right, by the way, not right when I was diagnosed, but I had for years, off and on taking all kinds of junk like that. And so anyway, I ate the sloppy joe because I was hungry. And then a few days later, they said, hey, you're clear to go home. We're going to release you. My surgeon came to check on me doing his rounds. And we had a conversation. And I said, hey, is there any food I need to avoid? Because, everything you eat goes through your digestive tract. It goes through your large intestine, right? Yeah. The bulk of it anyway. So I was just thinking, I don't want to eat the wrong thing. Are there foods that are off limits? I don't know anything about surgery and like this kind of stuff. And he says, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer.
Wow. So you could use like a straw for that beer if that was your healing nutrition, for example. That's so embarrassing. It's ridiculous. No. So for people who are listening to this, my people know that this makes my blood boil. And on behalf of the medical system, I apologize for our incredible, it's not just lack of knowledge, Chris, it's misinformation with authority that we dole out like candy, and it is candy. We tell people it doesn't matter what they eat. That's completely ridiculous. So that was my little rant. Sorry that we did that to you. What did your mom say about sloppy joe? Did your mom come in flame, like fists of flaming about that sloppy joe situation? Or was she even aware of what they were telling you?
She didn't, that I recall, she didn't say anything about it. She may not have even been there in that moment. I don't recall. I was on some pretty heavy drugs.
Yeah.
So that's probably why the sloppy joe tasted okay. But anyway, like that was all the advice I got from my surgeon. He had no advice at all on digestive health or anything.
Of course not.
So anyway, I left the hospital, went home. I'm recovering from surgery. I'm trying to get off pain medication because I just didn't like the feeling of being on the pain pills. And I learned later that opioids actually can promote metastasis, which is kind of like a really big sort of like not talked about
I didn't know
secret in the cancer treatment world, is that there's published studies on opioid drugs promoting metastasis. So anyway, that's not a good thing either. But as I was sobering up, I was thinking about my life and how much time I have left and my future, and what was to become of me. And I had seen late stage cancer patients in the world, right? Out in the world, right? You're just at the mall or you're at a restaurant or maybe church, and you see someone that is, no hair, mask on, emaciated, yellow skin, just sunken in. When you see another person in that condition, it's alarming,
Yeah.
right? And it's disturbing. And I don't want to say that in an insulting way, but it just makes you think, oh my gosh, like, what is this person going through?
Right.
What have they been through to end up at this physical state? And
Right.
it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I had those images in my head and I thought about myself and I'm like, is that what I'm going to become? Like, and I had a pretty strong resistance to that idea, right? To me becoming that.
Right. Who wouldn't?
And the idea of poisoning my way back to health didn't make sense. And that might sound like an overly simplistic, rationale or assessment, but I'm a reductionist in a lot of ways, and I try to take complicated things and reduce them down to very simple, to the simple essence of truth, right? And to me, I'm like, I'm having a hard time understanding how this is going to help me long term. So I didn't have any other options that I knew of, but I had this increasing internal resistance. So my wife and I prayed about it. And I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me what to do. I don't know what to do. This doesn't feel right at all. I just feel like this is not for me. And 2 days later, I got a book that was mailed to me from a man who was a friend of my dad's. And this guy lived in Alaska. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. He mails this book, which was a book written by another guy named George Malcolmus. And I start reading this book and I realized this was a book. This guy, George Malcolmus, had healed his colon cancer without surgery, chemo, or radiation by changing his diet. And not just changing it a little, like he didn't go on Jenny Craig.
Mm-hmm.
He converted to a raw food diet. Okay. Fruits and vegetables, back to the Garden of Eden, only fruits and vegetables, all organic, and lots of juicing. And I'm reading his story and I just got choked up just right in the middle of it because I knew this was an answer to prayer. I just felt it. I was like, I prayed, I asked for something, and this showed up, and this is incredible. Like, and I had that little spark of courage and faith and inspiration from one person's story. And that was enough for me to change my life. Right.
Wow.
I'm like, well, this guy did it. He definitely doesn't seem, special in any way. And if his body healed, maybe my body can heal. And as I started to read more and learn more, I had the revelation that, well, the way I'm living is killing me. I'd never heard anyone talk about cancer being a chronic disease that's caused by our diet and lifestyle. Yeah. And so was this whole sort of revelation of knowledge, right? It opened up to me. And I realized that I was not a victim of disease. This is an important point. Most cancer patients, when they go to the doctor, they're like, why did I get cancer? What caused my cancer? Do you have any idea? How'd this happen? And the doctors often say, well, it might be genetic or hereditary, or it might just be bad luck. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that is borderline malpractice, because I believe it's withholding potentially life-saving information on diet and lifestyle and their contribution to disease and to cancer survival from lots of published research, withholding that information from the patient, information they could use to help themselves recover, to increase their odds of survival. And instead, they're just told, no, it's nothing you did. It's not your fault. Don't get on the internet. You just need to show up for treatment and cross your fingers and say your prayers, and we'll do the best we can. And then they're told things like, Well, the treatments that we have now work very well for your type of disease, and they're very effective. And that type of language is deceptive because patients hear just effective and they think cure. They hear it works very well and they think cure, right? They think, oh, it works the new drugs really work well. They're very effective. My doctor said they're very effective. And what they don't understand is that's medical lingo. Very effective means it's proven to shrink tumors. It works well means, yes, there will be tumor shrinkage. Very likely there will be some tumor shrinkage, but it doesn't mean it's going to cure you.
Right.
And patients don't know that. And there are some very critical questions that a cancer patient needs to ask their doctor. And I actually created a free download called 20 Questions for Your Oncologist. And this is on every page of my website. There's a link to it on chrisbeatcancer.com. And if you don't ask the right questions, you will not make a good decision about your treatment. You would just be rushed into treatment that you don't understand. You have no idea what drugs they're going to give you, what the effects of the drugs are, what the likelihood of curative potential the drugs have, what the short-term and long-term side effects are. Like, these are questions you've got to ask. The most important question that you need to ask is, will this treatment cure my cancer? Which is a yes or no. And you'd be surprised how many cancer patients don't ask that question because they're afraid of the answer. And doctors don't like to talk about it because it's very uncomfortable, talking about death, with patients. And I get that. So, and I'm not trying to demonize doctors. They're in a very difficult position. It's very difficult to be a doctor. Doctors have some of the highest rates of suicide of any profession. It is a very difficult profession, emotionally, mentally, physically. And most doctors, even, we're excluding the bad ones, but the good ones are trapped in a profession that pays them well, but limits their freedom, their ability to treat and care for patients in a holistic way. Right. And they're just given trained in a limited set of options that for chronic disease rarely ends up curing a person. It just sort of mitigates the side effects of disease for an indefinite period of time. So again, I didn't know any of this stuff. Okay. This is stuff I learned later, right? I knew nothing when I was going through this, but I did have enough common sense to think, okay, I want to build my body back up. I don't want to tear it down, and I want to take control of my life and my health. And I want to do everything in my power to help myself. And that's the big kicker, is that when a patient is told it's nothing you did, right? They become a powerless victim of disease. They leave the cancer clinic in a state of fear and discouragement and depression and hopelessness, and they're victimized by their disease. And they're also told, just go home and do whatever you want, eat whatever you want. None of that matters. Your only hope is, this combination of drugs, maybe surgery and radiation, or maybe we've got some new drugs we can try on you if you'd like to be a guinea pig. And that's it. And it's a really, really, really powerless place to be. So I am a shoot first, ask questions later type of person. My wife and I joke, it's ready, fire, aim is really the way I sort of approach life. And so I after reading, not even finishing this first book, I was like, I'm all in. I'm going to change my diet overnight. I'm going all raw foods. And at that time, you have to, this was January 2004. So the context is important. One, there was no social media. Okay. There was no YouTube. I don't know what we did on the internet, but it wasn't fun.
Fetch. There was like this little dog that ran around. You could pull things off the internet with Fetch.
Yeah. Wikipedia, I guess, and Google, but you weren't getting, weren't getting any video on the internet. That's for sure. There's no video on the internet. Like, it was like 5-second clips, now you can watch video on the internet all day, all night, but so, why did I bring that up? Because,
Because you jumped right in and
Well,
you
I jumped
started
right in. Yes.
everything available, and there wasn't that much available on the internet yet. So
No, there was no help. I didn't find anything online that seemed worth my attention in January 2004. Uh, and the raw food diet was a fringe weirdo diet. Okay. I'd never heard of the raw food diet. Never
really,
heard of
even
it.
with your mom, who was like
No,
crunchy prototype, no?
no, she knew about it, but I had never heard about it. Okay. When I brought it up with her, she was like, oh, yeah. And she had a bunch of books about the raw food diet written in the 70s, like she was very familiar. She'd never done it, like that but she had read all about it. It was a fringe weirdo diet for sick people. That's what the raw food diet was, mostly cancer. So I'm like, okay, well, this is the diet for me. I'm all in. And I loved the idea of going back to nature, eating foods in their purest, most unadulterated form. And I just thought, yeah, this makes sense. And I want to see what will happen in my body if I do this. So I was also really curious, really interested to see like what's going to happen if I overdose on nutrition. Like, this is kind of cool. This is exciting. So it was cool to me. It wasn't cool anywhere else, right? There weren't like a bunch of beautiful people on Instagram, right? Showing their breakfast and their lunch and whatever on the beach in Hawaii, that kind of thing. Like, none of that. There was no inspo, raw food inspo available to me. So I I decided overnight, I went to immediately I went to Whole Foods, loaded up the shopping cart with vegetables, and decided, okay, like how am I going to make this work? I bought a juicer, and I was just like, I'm doing it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm doing it. And so I called my wife and I'm like, I got this book and this guy had healed his colon cancer with the raw food diet and juicing. And like, we got to get a juicer. And she's at work in this cubicle, like totally like The Office, like the TV show. Like, she is in that setting around those kind of people.
Say no more.
Looking, staring at an Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah.
Just like hating life, really.
Yeah.
And her husband has cancer. And now he's telling her he's going to do some crazy, raw food diet, that she's never heard of either. And he thinks it's going to help him heal his cancer.
How'd she do with that?
She didn't take it well. She didn't take it well. She was just kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, well, you're still getting chemo, right? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. Well, it didn't take long for that information to spread throughout her whole family. And my in-laws start calling, right, and trying to talk me into chemo. And they're saying, you have to do what the doctor says. They know best. Don't you think if there was something better, they'd know about it? I know somebody who tried alternative therapies and they died. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like everybody's against me. Everybody's just turned on me. In an instant. Like, no one thinks this is a good idea. I prayed, I got this answer. Everybody's saying, don't do that. So that really threw a wrench in the plan. But fortunately for me, I am stubborn. And I had already made up my mind to do that. Right. And so I just started, right. I had no support. My mom supported me. She definitely did. But beyond my mom, I had no initial support. And sometimes, look, you have to step out into the unknown in faith alone. Yeah. There are times in life where there are opportunities for you to step out in faith, to do something that you're called to do. And you look around and you're like, not only do I not have support, but I have opposition to do this. And you have to do some real soul searching in those moments. And I just knew in my core that what I was doing was going to help me.
So let me stop you there for 1 second, because I think I've heard a couple things about you. You know, you shoot first, ask questions later, you jump right in with both feet. You kind of intuitively know something and you trust that. I think a lot of people would like to have that kind of clarity, but instead wrestle with a lot of ambivalence. And so when those birds start chirping, saying, you know, that's a bad idea, you don't know what you're doing, and the doctors know best, that can take on a real life of its own, and people really internalize that. What advice do you have for people who aren't as clear about their next step, whether it's chemotherapy and radiation or a natural foods diet or whatever their next step is in their healing project, who are looking to get some clarity? How do they manage all that kind of like background noise?
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, you really have to listen to your instincts and your intuition. And I find that a lot of people tend to ignore, right? They ignore their gut.
Mhm.
And we've all been in a situation in our past where we had a gut feeling about something and we ignored it. And
Mhm.
then we realized later, like, oh, I knew that was a bad idea. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really important to really get alone and quiet and listen to your instincts and intuition, listen to your gut, right? And pray and ask God for guidance and wait for an answer, and don't be rushed into anything out of fear,
Yeah.
because fear-based decisions are almost always the wrong decision. When you're in a state of fear, you make irrational and impulsive decisions. And you can't think clearly when you're fearful. You can't do it. It's fear hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, interfere with your brain function. They
Yeah.
turn off your prefrontal cortex,
Totally.
basically, and
100%.
they light up your brain stem, your reptilian brain, your survival brain. And so you got to get to a place where you're calm and you can think clearly and rationally about your next steps.
So in many
That's
cases, that kind of aloneness you felt in the beginning was actually a gift too, because it allowed for that space to really be alone with your thoughts and your intuitive knowing and get clear.
Yeah, it's true. I'm thankful. There's a lot of things in my life that prepared me for that moment, and one of them was being an only child. Being an only child, you're just used to being by yourself, right? Growing up and being alone and making decisions for yourself generally, unless you have like really domineering parents that are trying to make all your decisions for you. But I did not have that. My parents always kind of let me make my own way
Yeah.
in the world. And so that really set me up in a way to be able to make this really hard decision with no support.
Mhm.
Because in my core, I knew like I'm doing this because I want to live and I want to survive, right? And I also had the confidence that changing my life for the better could only help,
Right.
right? There was no risk of harm,
Right.
right? Unless you have some weird food allergy you don't know about, right? Like eating too
Right.
much broccoli or something, but
Right.
have that. But so yeah, so it's taken a lot of introspection and reflection for me to understand what I was going through at the time, because I didn't have all this clarity then.
Yeah.
I was really it was instinct and intuition and my gut and faith, like just all of that together. And my past life up until that point, it just primed me to be right in that moment where I just had to step out in faith alone, right? And I had enough confidence and motivation to do it. But there was a lot of pressure from friends and family to go the conventional way. So I go, in order to ease that pressure, I agreed to go see the oncologist, and the meeting did not go well. We were basically, I mean, he just flipped through my chart. He's like, look, you got young adult colon cancer. You got about a 60% chance of living 5 years with treatment. Um, you know, blah, 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 right? We're going to give you 5-FU and leucovorin. And, it was just sort of this boilerplate, like, okay, who's the next patient kind of treatment. And I asked him a couple questions in our meeting, just sort of not earlier. I talked about asking the right questions. Well, I didn't ask all the right questions, but I asked 2 questions that turned out to be incredibly helpful. The first one was, I said, what about the raw food diet? Can I do that? And he said, no, you can't do that. It'll fight the chemo, which was pretty weird, right? That's a weird thing to say. And then the second question was, well, are there any alternative therapies available? And at that point, just 2 questions was like all this guy could handle for me. His demeanor changed. He became very condescending and rude and short. And he just proceeded to like berate me with all of the arrows in his quiver, right? As to why I had to do chemo, and basically said in so many words, if you don't do chemo, you're going to die. And he said, if you don't do chemo, you're insane. That's the first thing he said. And then all the other stuff, and put me in a state of fear and panic. And I was deer in the headlights for sure. The meeting ended. I went straight to the front desk, made an appointment to get a port put in a few weeks to start chemo. And that is the way it goes for most cancer patients. They're just put into this state of fear, and they just, it's like I had been brainwashed, right?
Yeah. Well, you were getting acculturated to the cult, and, kind of bullied into it because you showed a little resistance. And so he got stronger and bigger and louder.
Yes.
And scarier.
I had, and the thing is, like, I wasn't even resisting. I was just trying to just hopefully maybe see if there's anything else out there. But he interpreted as me resisting, and he bowed up on me basically. So we, I'd been on the raw food diet for 1 week at that time. I was feeling really good. I went to that appointment feeling really good about it, feeling hopeful and optimistic and had energy. And I was just feeling good physically, mentally. And, but we left that appointment just so shattered. My wife and I, we were so discouraged, hopeless. And we sat in her car and held hands and cried, and I choked out a prayer, and it was awful. It was just a really, really difficult moment, really difficult day.
So again, I just want to pause and say, I'm so sorry that was your experience. Doctors don't go to med school to become jerks, but they don't learn the right tools, and then they feel bad about that, and then they project all that onto patients, and it's not okay what he did to you.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
It's not. And there's great doctors out there. And this is what I like to say. There's the same number of bad people in every profession. It's the same percentage, right? I don't know what the percentage is, but there's the same number of bad plumbers as there are electricians, as there are carpenters, as there are doctors.
Probably true.
There are bad apples in every bunch, bunch. Yes, doctors are smarter people to get through med school for sure, but it doesn't make them better people, nicer, more caring, more loving, honest, right? It doesn't make them any of those things. It doesn't make them moral or ethical or anything. It just makes them an expert in medicine. So you're going to run into some bad apples, in the medical profession. They're just out there. I mean, Dr. Death is this podcast. I don't know if you've listened to this thing, but there are 2 seasons of Dr. Death. But the first one's about a guy named Chris Dunch, who went to my high school.
What?
Oh yeah. Now he's just really famous guy because he was a horrible malpractice doctor, just paralyzed his best friend with a botched spine surgery. It's just a crazy, crazy story. Wow. Christopher Dunch, and he's in jail. And the second season is about a doctor that I wrote about in my first book, Dr. Farid Fatah, who was an oncologist that was falsely diagnosing cancer patients and treating them with chemo and billing Medicare, and made millions and millions of dollars. He was in the Detroit area, and just absolute, total, egregious fraud.
Wow.
Right? Literally telling people they had cancer when they didn't, giving them chemo drugs, and billing Medicare.
Crazy.
And he's in jail too. So anyway, there's some bad doctors out there, but lots of good ones. So the point is, we were treated badly, and that was important because it was important for my wife to see, because she had a really high faith in the medical system. And when she saw how they treated us, something changed in her. And even though it was really rough and discouraging, it was very important that that happened.
Yeah.
So from there, I'm really thankful that I had time, because a lot of patients, like I said earlier, are rushed right into treatment. And I had time after surgery. I was kind of rushed into surgery, but it's fine. But I had time to recover from surgery before they were going to start chemo. So I just went home and fired up the juicer. I just went back, okay, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I've still got, 3 weeks or whatever. And I kept reading and researching and praying and soul searching and eating tons of fruits and vegetables and juicing every day. And I found a naturopathic doctor, a clinical nutritionist. He connected me with an integrative surgical oncologist. And I slowly started to put together a support system. So it went from me and my mom to like me and my mom, a naturopath and an MD, right? And then my wife is coming, she's coming around. And so I had a core little group of support there, but it was pretty tough. It was still pretty tough in the beginning, because I became so obsessive with eating raw foods and what I was reading and learning. And I was trying to drag my wife, with me. I'm like trying to evangelize to her, about what I'm reading and learning, and like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this, like this. And she really didn't want to hear it. She was coming from a place of fear. And every time I would bring these things up, it would remind her, and the fear would creep in, and she would think I was, going to die, and I was making a horrible mistake and all this stuff. And there was a moment where she said, I don't like the person you're becoming. Yeah. I mean, talk about, right, a knife in the heart.
Wow.
That really hurt. It really hurt, because and I said to her something along the lines of like, you don't understand, like everything that I'm doing right now is I'm doing because I want to live. So that was hard, but I just realized, okay, I've just got to cool it with her. I've just got to focus on me. She doesn't have to support it or believe in me or understand, right? I just got to get well. And I think this is something that a lot of patients need to hear, especially if they're embarking on a health and healing journey and they have no support, right? It's like, look, people who think you're crazy will eventually call you a genius. Just don't worry about the critics. Just focus on you. And so that's
the other thing I want to say about that, Chris, is that the people in your inner circle aren't necessarily going to be your biggest supporters right off the bat, right? Like you have to cultivate a healing team, and you were cobbling that together where you could find it. But I think people sometimes get down that, well, like my husband is not on board, or my kids think I'm crazy, or my parents are against it. But like those people can love you and not be on your team.
Yes. And they did love me. They loved me. They wanted me to live. They were afraid I was making a big mistake. And thank you for pointing that out, because the good thing now is that it's easy to find and connect with like-minded people online, on social media. It's easy to find health and wellness lovers, holistic medical doctors. It's just great. I mean, there's a huge world that opens up to you when you start poking around online. So that's wonderful. I didn't have that in 2004. And so it was definitely harder for me having no support. But like I said earlier, I was comfortable doing my own thing my whole life. And so it was like, it's just something else I'm going to do by myself, right? Not worry about what people think. I've just got to do it for me. So fast forward, I never went back to that first oncologist. I created a simple routine to follow, the healthiest possible daily routine to follow that was sustainable. And I just did it every single day. I was overdosing on nutrition. I went from eating 1 to 2 servings of fruits and vegetables to eating between 15 and 20 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And I promise you, if you do this, wonderful things will happen in your body. Wonderful things. You don't even have to understand any of it. Like, you don't have to have a medical degree, a science degree. You don't even have to have a GED to understand that fruits and vegetables are good for you. And the more you eat, the better. Okay. That's the takeaway here on the physical side. Exercise is incredible. It turns off cancer promoting genes. It activates anti-cancer genes in the body. It also improves detoxification, your cardiovascular system, and your mood. It's an incredible antidepressant. So the really simple things that anyone can do, hardcore healthy diet, fruits and vegetables, exercise, are some of the most powerful. Yeah. And so I learned that, but then there's another part of my story that, you know, the other big thing that had to change in my life was my mindset. My mindset and my attitude and my emotional life all had to be addressed, because I realized I was kind of a swirling mess emotionally. I was entertaining a lot of toxic emotions, and toxic emotions are usually either rooted in the past or the future. Rooted in the past would be emotions like anger and bitterness and resentment toward other people, right? People who've hurt you. If your emotions are rooted in the future, it's worry and fear and anxiety, right? You're letting fear and worry consume you about things that you imagine could happen, right? Most of the time don't. And they steal your joy. And then there's some toxic emotions that are present focused, which that's like envy and jealousy, right? Where like, social media is the worst for that, right? Because we're constantly, even more now than ever in human history, comparing ourselves to others, and everybody's putting up a front of how great their life is, right? And just posting the great moments of vacations and my toes in the sand and stuff like that, right? And so all of those emotions are toxic, right? Bitterness and resentment, jealousy and envy, fear and worry, and they suppress your immune system, right? It's not just like this esoteric idea that like, oh, those are toxic thoughts, you know what I mean? That just like live somewhere up here, you know, in this ethereal realm. No, when you are when you are entertaining negative emotions, there is a physical response in your body, and you felt it. Like, you know what it feels like when you're fearful. Your heart starts pounding, your eyes dilate, right? Your blood's pumping, like you get shaky, and you know, things go. That's adrenaline and cortisol, right? And those same hormones are activated, increased in your body when you're stressed, when you're worried, when you're fearful, when you're angry, when you're entertaining resentment, when you're stewing on painful things that people have done to you, or pain that people have caused you. And so I had to catch myself in all of that stuff, right? If fear and worry would creep in, I would just catch it and be like, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid. God, I trust you. I'm going to give you my fear. You're in control. I'm not going to worry. Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow, for today has enough trouble of its own. That's good advice. Right. Don't worry about tomorrow. Focus on today. When I would feel resentments and bitterness toward people that hurt me in my past, I realized I need to forgive these people. And I made a decision to forgive every person who had ever hurt me. Every person. And that's not something you can just do in an instant. The process of forgiveness is you have to go and pull open that filing cabinet in your mind where you've filed away all the painful memories. Yeah. And one by one, you got to pull them out, right? And sort through them. And so, for example, I can think back at a time on the playground, you know, when I was a little kid and some kids picked on me, they were mean to me, right? And it hurt my feelings, and it was like really hard on my little kid emotions. But I can make a choice as I think about that to forgive those people, you know, to forgive the mean kid. And if you do this process, if you go all the way back to as far as you can remember and work through your life and forgive every single person who's ever hurt you, you free yourself from this bitterness and resentment and pain that is still present in your subconscious. See, it may not be bothering you on a daily basis, but it's in your subconscious. It's what is often called unresolved emotional conflict, right? It's unresolved because they hurt you. And as far as you know, they never got punished, right, for their wrongdoing.
Right.
And so when you decide to forgive, you're releasing them, right? You're releasing this need to get even, to get back at them, to get justice or whatever. And you're giving them to God. You say, they're all yours. Just like you give him your worries and your fears, you give him the people who've hurt you and say, you know what, they've hurt me. You know how I feel about it. This is the way I pray. God, you know how I feel about it. I'm still mad, but I'm choosing to forgive them and I'm letting it go. I'm giving them to you. They're all yours. So you can deal with them. I'm releasing them to you, and I'm asking you to be merciful, and I'm asking you to bless them.
Beautiful. Were there any in particular that you had to do that like 300 times for? Or do you feel like you've gotten in a groove now where you're like, when you go to forgive someone, it's just like wash, rinse, repeat, and then you're done?
I'm definitely in the groove now because, I started figuring this out 15 years ago and
Right.
working on this and I worked through my life pretty quickly. And I realized that we've got to be quick to forgive. And this is a big theme. It's a theme in my first book, but it's a theme throughout the new book, Beat Cancer Daily. So the different aspects of forgiveness pop up throughout the book to help someone work this out in their life. But one of those is being quick to forgive, right? Because people are going to hurt you. They're going to insult you. They're going to disappoint you, let you down. They're just going to screw up. And you got to just let that stuff go quickly and not hold on to it because it only hurts you. You see,
Exactly.
the longer you hold on to bitterness, the more damage it does. And the damage is to you. It's to your heart. And if you have a sick heart, you will eventually develop a sick body.
Yeah.
So you gotta heal your heart, and forgiveness heals your heart. It doesn't make the offense okay, right? It doesn't justify it or anything like that. It doesn't mean you have to be friends or talk to the person or anything, right? It's you releasing it. And so now, if I have a memory of something that someone said, and people are mean to me on the internet, they say all kinds of mean stuff to me on the internet. And I forgive, if somebody posts a mean comment or rude comment, I just say, you know what? I'm like, wow, that was rude, but I forgive them. God, bless them. It's okay. Right. I'm okay. And I move on. But if there's a painful memory and it kind of creeps back in, I just have to catch it. Right. I just catch it. And if I start to feel any resentment at all, I just have to catch myself in the moment and say, you know what? I forgave that person. Right. I already forgave him. I'm sticking with it. I'm sticking with my decision. And I liken forgiveness to a healthy diet. It only works if you stick with it.
Yeah.
You got to stick with it. You make a decision, you let it go, right? You're releasing them. And when you ask God to bless the people who've hurt you, to have mercy on the people who've hurt you, it really changes you, right? It's like you're inviting him to come in and heal your heart. It accelerates the process. And Jesus also said, he gives great advice. He said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Right? That's it. I mean, so that's what I do.
I love it. And I love, as you were talking about forgiveness, I was reminded of all the different ways it did pop up in your new book. So I'll tell you, when I sat down to read that new book, I got like 3 pages in before I realized, oh, I should do 1 page a day. Maybe I skipped the instruction manual, but I just plowed through it because it was such a compelling and easy and quick read. Now, did I do all the work of it? No. Each page is kind of like an invitation. There's like a nugget of truth there, and in many cases, an invitation to do a little practice around that. But it's beautiful for people who are looking for, and not just people who are trying to heal from cancer, right? Like people who are trying to be vibrantly well on all limbs of their tree, emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, social. Anyone can benefit, I think, from it. So thank you for writing such a beautifully concise, especially in this age when like everyone's inbox has like 1,000 emails or more in it and no one has time for big things. It's a really beautiful, quick read every day that'll keep you on track.
Thank you for that endorsement. It really means a lot to me. And you're right. Each day, it's funny because we have a lot of folks in our community, and some of them are like, I read the whole thing, really fast, but now I'm going to go back and read one day at a time. But it really is like each day is, I love the way you put it, is an invitation to think differently, to act differently, right? To check your thoughts and your emotions, to practice forgiveness, to practice gratitude. I know we're probably running out of time here, but I want to say one more thing and this is a big theme in the new book, is gratitude, because it really is the secret to happiness, is the practice of gratitude. And cancer taught me how to be grateful and thankful in my most difficult season of life. It taught me how to find joy and peace in the storm. And the way I do that, and now it's like my little secret weapon of happiness, is is no matter what happens, right? I get bad news too, just like other people. Like, stuff happens, and when I get the bad news and I feel the emotional response to it, right? Anger or frustration or disappointment or whatever it is, I stop myself in the middle of it. I catch it and I say, you know what? I've got 1,000 things to be thankful for, right? Let me just take stock real quick, right? Let me just count my blessings real quick here. Yeah, I got this thing to be unhappy about, but over here, I've got all these wonderful blessings in my life. I've got a wife who loves me. I've got 2 daughters who are beautiful and they love me. I've got a pretty great dog and an awesome cat. I have a home, I have a car, I have enough money to pay my bills when they come up, and on and on and on, right? I have my eyesight, I have my hearing, and I can go all day, right? Once I just start counting my blessings and I'm like, oh, I'm a rich person, right? Because of all these wonderful blessings in my life that are not money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most powerful statement that I say to myself, and this is a page in the new book in Beat Cancer Daily, is right now, there's someone dying in the hospital that would give anything to trade places with you. All I have to do is remind myself that. And my perspective changes in an instant. Just in an instant, I'm like, I'm being stupid. I'm being ridiculous. I don't need to pout, right? I need to rejoice, right? That I am alive to have this, whatever the problem is. You know what I mean? I'm thankful that I have a problem, right? Because it means I'm above ground, and I'm not under the earth. I'm above it. So every day of life really is a gift and a blessing, but it's easy for us to take things for granted because we're so blessed. We have so much to be thankful for, and we're spoiled, right? Most of us are spoiled. We just have everything we could ever want or need in life. And boy, a trip to a third world country on a mission trip will do your soul some real good when you just step outside your little perfect bubble and see the kind of poverty and difficulty that other people in the world have to live with every day. It's like, I've taken trips like that. And I found myself just crying in a hotel room one night, just ashamed of ever complaining about anything.
Right. Yeah.
What can I say? You visit an orphanage in a country like Cambodia and you're like,
I got nothing.
I am ashamed of myself. Why have I ever complained? So gratitude is such a powerful thing. And it's a big theme in the new book for sure.
I wanted to even end on your day 209, which really stuck with me, which was very quick, but here's what it said. What are you looking for? If you're looking for things to be upset over and outraged about, you will find them. If you're looking for things to be thankful for and happy about, you will find them. The question is, what are you looking for? Super powerful, Chris Wark.
Thank you. That's a special day in the book right there. And it's true. We all have a choice in every moment, every day, to direct our focus toward negative things, things we don't like, or the good things in our life, right? Always, you always have the choice. And it's so, I thank you earlier for what you said about the book, because it isn't a book for cancer patients. I know it's called Beat Cancer Daily. And yes, it is for cancer patients, but most of the days, most of the entries are not talking about cancer at all, right? It's really for anyone that wants encouragement, that wants to grow and change and be more loving, have more joy and gratitude in their life, wants to forgive and let go of the past, and needs a little hope and encouragement, a little courage to step out in faith and change their life. I mean, that's who it's for. So it really is a bigger audience than that. And frankly, preventing cancer is beating it. So if you want to beat cancer daily through prevention, then I think you'll really enjoy this book.
And yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome. It's been really great having you here. Is there any final thing you want to say to this tribe that's listening in and looking for ideas?
Well, I've said quite a bit. I think one of the most important things that I try to help folks in my community understand, cancer patients or folks that are serious about prevention, is that your choices matter. Right? Yeah. You have the power to create your future with your choices today. This is what it's about. It's just about making good choices today. Don't worry about tomorrow's choices. Make good ones today. You can deal with tomorrow. But your choices will lead you down one of two paths, right? They can lead you down the path of health or down the path of disease. And you have the power to choose. You're not a victim of fate. You're not a victim of disease. Your choices matter. And that is, probably one of the biggest themes of my entire mission and message is one of empowerment, that we really do have. We've been given the power to make choices that affect our life and our health and our future. And so let's make good choices, right? And they're simple ones. You don't have to be a rich person. You don't have to be educated. You don't have to be successful. You just have to be willing to change. And that's it. And so if that sounds like you, then get my new book, Beat Cancer Daily, 365 Days of Inspiration, Encouragement, and Action Steps to Survive and Thrive.
Awesome. We'll leave it at that. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.